Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston, live from Jerusalem for me, and live from Telstone for Rabbi Winston. Check out his website, 36.org. You see it right underneath his picture there. And without further ado, please, Rabbi Winston, give us your brilliant shiur about what are we talking about tonight? Remind me.
You're supposed to remind me.
For the redemption.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, okay.
Okay, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Okay. When I get off the, I finish the shear and I think about in my mind what I spoke about and what I went over. Uh, I often wonder, if it's too much for people, if people really get. The truth is, I don't even know who's watching. I don't know what level of people are watching, whether it's advanced, not advanced. And I almost hear, people saying, what do I need to know this for? Like, what's the point of this? And I try to give a lot of analogies, the digestion analogy, and in life in general. But basically, as we've mentioned before, that history is either in one of two modes, and the fact that a person doesn't know this, it doesn't understand this, a lot of times maybe it doesn't make a difference to their life, at least that they notice, but it certainly makes a difference to their life from God's perspective, because it's like an employee working in a factory. He doesn't understand what the job is about, what he's supposed to be doing, even though he's having a great time. And he figures he's accomplishing fantastic things every single day. Put this together. He doesn't understand what he's really actually there for. Then he's not gonna do a good job, and certainly won't keep his job in the end. And that's the same is true for life in general. That whether people realize it or think about it and believe it, God made the world. He made the world, and he made it for a very specific purpose. He didn't make it. They simply watch a bunch of human beings running around like chickens with their heads cut off from place to place and doing this and getting involved. He did a very specific purpose. And like any play or movie, you have the main actors and you have the secondary actors and you have the third level actors, people in the background. And everyone, is based upon their soul, where they're coming from, what job they might, have, and what role they might play, and what reward they might get later on because of it. But we're all part of the same story, whether we know it or not, whether we accept it or not. And a person can deny it and say, "I don't really care." I mean, that's what people do say. I remember I was once watching a documentary, when I call it, going back over 10 years. I get it. After the Twin Towers were brought down, and it was a documentary that was put together, a very fascinating documentary by architects and engineers and chemists about the findings to do with the World Trade Center, whether it was a conspiracy, not a conspiracy, but they actually weren't interested in so much in that. They just wanted to understand how it was possible for the buildings to fall the way they did, like a controlled implosion when it was hit by airplanes. They couldn't bring it down. Not going into the whole story right now. But one of the scientists, or I think she was a chemist or something like that, and she was shocked by the findings because it's not what she expected to see, and the implications were kind of like scary. She wasn't going out to say what it was about or who was behind it. They weren't doing that. Wasn't the point? That wasn't the man. That wasn't the point of the video itself. But she mentioned in this video that she called her brother to tell her brother what she had found, what they came up with, the conclusions they came up with, because it certainly was worth thinking about and wondering what's behind all of this. And her brother answered by saying, "I don't want to know about this. Don't tell me what you found. But do you understand what it means, what the implications? I don't care, because my life is going on the way I want it to go on, and I have my own struggles already. And to put that into my head is going to make me think about things I don't want to think about and complicate my life, and et cetera, et cetera." But on the other hand, people worry all the time. Books have been written, movies have been made about this, the takeover of the average citizen by governments and things like that. We have major control issues in the world. This is information that could literally save a person's life or prepare them at least for what's coming up. You could just see the advances taking place in artificial intelligence. I mean, when you don't think about it very much, but when you look for something in Google, it tells you it was able to find what you were looking for in 0.0003 seconds. And, wow. Amazing. That sure saves me time. But you have to start asking the question, like, how were you able to do it so fast? Did you only check 2 or 3 sources? No, it checked maybe hundreds of millions of sources or millions of sources in a matter of a fraction of time. How are you doing that? Which computers can do things like that? And how is that being used? People don't ask questions, they don't care. And the information is very vital, because a lot of times it allows us to prevent things from happening that we don't want to happen, or at least save us or prepare us for what's coming up next. In preparation, the Gemara clearly says, is the name of the game. The Gemara says that the person who prepares Erev Shabbos, he eats on Shabbos. If they don't prepare for Shabbos, you can't eat on Shabbos, because on Shabbos you can't cook. Obviously, you could eat something on Shabbos cold and you can have raw food, right? But the point of the Gemara is that life in this world, the quality of life and what you're able to accomplish in life comes down to how prepared you are for what's coming up next, for what has to be done or how you have to do it. Just to wait at the last second. So many times I know I kick myself because I ask myself, why didn't I prepare earlier? Why didn't I start this process earlier? I thought I had all kinds of time, and I ran out of time, and I needed more time because it turns out there are more things involved in getting the job done than I thought, and I was a little lazy, didn't take it serious enough. And there's this thing about time, how many times I come late to something because I thought I was on time. I thought I had more time to get there. And being prepared, is one of the most fantastic things you can do in life in every respect. In every respect, it just means you get more out of life because of it. And there's no bigger and better thing to be prepared for than redemption. We're now going through these parshiot. I mean, this is part of the process. You can ask the question, why was it so important that Moshe Bennett goes down, he succeeds and he fails and succeeds the second time? If to go through 10 plagues, as the commentaries point out, one plague would have been enough. The plague of plague. That's it. Just have a plague, like coronavirus, but even more deadly. Run through Egypt and kill all the Egyptians. We just walk out. No, bells and whistles and sounds and lights and all that. Just like, you want freedom? It can be done very simply. Why do we go through all of this? Because it's all part of the preparation process. The Jewish people are being elevated from slave status to free status, but not just any freedom, as the mixed multitude tries to sell to the Jewish people about Sinai, vis-a-vis the golden calf, but a specific freedom that allows us to rise above our most basic instinctual nature in order to be what we are made to be. Tzelem Elokim, living and acting in the image of God, because that's not to please God, even though that's what pleases God, but that's not why we're doing it. It's like analogy, because a father who, it's the son actually, the son decides he wants something. He's a little bit lazy, and he wants something. And he says to his father, can I have a little extra money this week because I want to buy something? But the father is concerned that the son's not getting much out of life. So he says to the son, I'll tell you what, you can have the money if you will read 10 classic books over whatever time. When you finish the books, I'll give you the money happily, but you have to read the books first. And the son wants to do that. Okay, whatever. He wants the money, so he's prepared to do it. And he also has to write a book report to prove he read the book. So the son begrudgingly accepts the deal, and he starts to read one book and muddles through it, and it's hard, and writing the report takes a long time. And then he starts the second book, and at one point in time, it's taking so long that he decides he wants to cancel the whole thing. It's not worth the money in the end. But then he sees somebody with the thing he wants, using it, enjoying it, and he's re-inspired to buy that thing, to go after that thing. So he goes back and reads a third book and a fourth book, and finally it takes a whole year for him to read 10 books, not very thick, and to write book reports. Right? Finally, at the end of the year, he comes to the father with a final book report, and he hands it to the father, who's impressed that his son stuck to the deal and read the books, and the reports have been getting better and better each time. And he's about to give the son the money that he's been waiting for. But rather than wait for the money, the son turns around and starts to walk out. And the father says to the son, where are you going? Here's the money. He said, oh, yeah, right. What do you mean, oh, right? That's the whole reason why you read these books in the first place. Where are you going? I'm going to the library. The library? Why? To take out more books. Now that I finished the 10th one, I need more. And the father smiles because that was the main idea he tried to get across, to show the son that reading the books was for his own good, not for his father's good. In the beginning, the son thought it was for the father, to please the father, to get the money. But that was just the motivation. After a while, the son began to realize he was learning things and he was enjoying it. He didn't realize he could enjoy reading books so much. And now that he was bitten and smitten by the reading bug, so to speak, so now he was on his own and he was doing it for himself. The same thing is true, but God does the same thing with us. That everything that we're being told in the Torah, everything that we have to do, looks like a labor only in the beginning. But, we want life and we believe that God grants it. We want health. We want wealth. We want family, shalom bayis and things like that. So we're prepared to do what has to be done. But after a while, if you stick with it and you use it properly, you begin to realize this has always only been for me and not for God. He doesn't need us, as the Medrash says. God doesn't need sacrifice. He doesn't need our sacrifice. Doesn't need any of the mitzvahs we do. He's complete. He's perfect. He's happy the way he is. But he does it for us. That we should do it for ourselves. And the motivation sometimes has to be a little external, a little superficial, to get us going, to wake us up and realize this. And the same thing is true when it comes to redemption. That it's such a primary thing. If you look at this week's parsha, next week's parsha, this period of time is called Shovavim, because the word Shovavim is really 6 letters that come from the first letter of the names of the 6 parshiyot, starting with Shmos. Shmos, Be'era, Bo, B'Shalach, right? Yisro, Mishpatim. And the reason why we make a big deal about this, some people even say slichos during these on Mondays and Thursdays during these 6 weeks, because it represents a period of time of personal development and achieving higher heights of personal greatness. Why now? Why specifically now? Why not earlier? Why not in Bereshis? It's called Sefer Yesharim, the book of the righteous, the upright, and Vayikra, which is all about making sacrifices for God. Why specifically now? Because this is the parsha that defines exile and redemption, but not just on a national level, on a personal level. Everybody's got their own paro, their own pharaoh. That's the Yetzer Hara. Excuse me. Everybody's enslaved to the Yetzer Hara. Everyone thinks that they're the ones in charge, when in fact what's really going on is they're answering to the Yetzer Hara. When do you find this out? You find it out whenever you're spiritually challenged. Everything's going fine. I remember once a person said to me, he came over to visit me, someone I'd known from a long time ago, and he wasn't religious. He came over to visit to show that he had no problem with my being religious and his not being religious. And he was very, very nice, kind, the whole thing like that. And at one point in time said, I believe, teach his own. You want to be, I don't have to, I accept that. And you have to accept that I'm not religious. I don't believe in the same thing. And I said, that's not the way it is. That's not the way Judaism and Torah looks at it. What I'm doing applies to everybody and to you as well. And the moment I brought that out and he felt that, it wasn't like he calmly said, well, I hear that what you're saying, but the truth is it's not what I want, and I don't really believe that. So you're allowed to believe what you want. I believe what I want, and let's just continue on without this. Let's agree to disagree. Didn't do that. He became very edgy. He started to squirm in his seat, and all of a sudden his whole nature and personality changed, and that was the last I saw of him at that point, because that challenged his Yetzer Hara, which he thought he was in control of. He thought he was the balabayas, the one running the show, and instead that challenge. Anytime we're morally challenged to do something, it could just be, getting up in time for minyan. It could just be not lying when it's profitable to lie. You feel bad about it. It could be, any situation that this is not really how a nice person is supposed to behave, not the way a moral person is supposed to behave, but you feel like doing it anyhow. Having that extra French fry or whatever, it's like, that's a little small here, but not returning the change that someone overpaid you or something. It doesn't feel right. And a little battle takes place inside of you. And that's when you realize there's 2 parts to you. There's the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. You are the Yetzer Tov. Your soul is your essence. You are the essence of who you are. That's the soul itself. And the Yetzer Hara, it just came along later on, is not even part of us. It's not who we are. We all have our own personal Yetzer Hara. but it's not the essence of who we are. And when that battle starts to ensue, then you begin to realize that somebody else is also inside there and apparently calling the shots way too often. But it's redemption, therefore, becomes taking over control of yourself, overcoming the paro, right? And everything that's going on in these parshiyot, on a national level, on an international level, on a global level, is something that could be applied also to even on an individual level too. It's something that could be be turned into a personal exile and personal redemption. So these parshiyot specifically are instructing us about how we can achieve personal redemption spiritually and physically even, but mostly spiritually. And that's why it's called shovim. But anyhow, the point is that there's only two modes. There's either exile or redemption. There's no in-between ground. There's no neutral ground. Either you're going towards exile, personal, national, international, whatever, or you're going towards redemption. One of the two. And unfortunately, we see by the plague of darkness that 4/5 of the Jewish population died because they chose not to be redeemed. Just like people choose, I don't want to hear, don't tell me, I don't want to know these things. Because if you tell me that, right, I'm gonna have to change my life. I don't want to change my life, even though it's gonna be for the better. But I don't want to change. I'm comfortable the way I am, because that's what we like, comfort. As my Rosh Hashiva used to always point out, that he used to always ask people, who didn't understand these things yet, and was trying to get them involved more, and he would ask them, in these talks he used to give when he used to travel, especially on fundraising trips. So he would talk to a group of people, and he would ask them, what's the opposite of pleasure? And people would say pain. Invariably, they'd say pain. And then he'd say, no, because some of the greatest pleasures we have in life come through pain. There's lots of pains we not only accept, we go after. Athletes, for example, or business people who want to become rich, they know that if I'm not pushing myself, I'm not using my time to the best of my body, to the best of my ability to achieve success, I won't win the Olympics. It's got to hurt. And people literally, I know, because when I used to jog as a much younger, and unless it was hurting, unless my lungs were hurting and my legs were tired, I didn't feel like I was getting exercise, even though I was running a fair distance. We look for some pains, and go after it because we understand that's the way to get more out of life. So it's not pain and pleasure are not opposites. The opposite of pain is comfort, not necessarily pleasure, comfort. And they would show them how basically that's the way they pattern their lives. And when you choose comfort as your primary goal, which to a large degree, that is what mankind does, and especially in Western society, then you shut the door on a lot of opportunity for personal perfection and growth, and of course, reward in the world to come. And worst of all, you shut yourself out of redemption. And the Jewish people are no strangers to that. We lost 4/5 of the population in Egypt. 12 million Jews got stuck and died in the plague of darkness. 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Countless Jews died in Spain, right? Most of them were exiled, but others, either converted, and that's the worst type of being killed and lost, and others through Europe, the Crusades and the Cossacks and the pogroms and you name it. We're no stranger to any of that because we weren't prepared, because we didn't understand the parameters, the dynamics of Jewish history was taking place. And here we are, very, very late in history, and so close to the end, and it kind of like say that for so long, yeah, but time's running out. Sometimes when you're sitting in the dentist chair, for example, you sit down and he's got work to do. It's going to be like at least an hour. But at some point in time, I used to tell myself this all the time, or even recent times, root canal, something like that. It's got to end at some point. At some point, it's got to be over. It's not going to go on all night. It's not going to go on for days. At some point, he's going to, it's killing. It's really hurting, even though he froze it, but at some point in time, it's got to come to an end. And where are you going to be when that happens? So some people jump ship early and lose the opportunity to go the full distance. Other people stick around and realize that, they got through it. A lot of problems work that way in life. But we have to know that we are very close to the end. It's just mathematically, that's just the way it is. 100 years ago, people said that too, but there were still 100 more years and close to the end, right? And 1,000 years ago, people tried to say the same thing as well. People were making calculations about the redemption back in the time of the Mishnah, but there was still 1,000, almost 2,000 years to go. But not anymore. This is 5783. And according to what the Tchis Mesim and the Zohar, and, all these different sources, put this way, it's much better to err on the side of caution. And besides, and this is a very important point, that, I'll make the point through analogy. This is something that doesn't come up very often, but for example, it's not in the Chumash, but it is brought down in the Medrash. It's apparently that 30 years before the Jewish people went out, there were people in the tribe from Ephraim who decided that the geula had come 30 years early, and they literally somehow got out. They left, they went to get out, and they got killed in the desert. They got attacked. It was premature. So people will say, from this you see that it's not worthwhile to jump the gun, for sure not. They died in the process, and therefore, just when the redemption comes, it comes, and just sit back and wait for it to happen. Even though when we do that, we're never prepared and we suffer even worse. But that's the idea. That's the attitude. That's the idea. So the Gemara says, yeah, well, you should know that's not the end of their story. The Jews that did, first of all, 4/5 died in Makas Choshev, plague of darkness. Okay, so the 1/5 that did go out pretty much died in the desert because of the golden calf and, of course, the sin of the spies. A handful of the Jews who actually, the Gemara itself says, like literally 2 people who were between the age of 20 and 60, Kalev and Yeshua, who left Mitzrayim, were the only 2 to survive of that age group to go to Eretz Yisrael 40 years later. Everybody else died in the desert. And according to one opinion, the Gemara, I think Rabbi Kiva even, that they don't have any portion of what to come. The Gemara seems to imply, and certainly later commentaries point out that everyone gets there's a question of what you have to go through to get there, but they never made Eretz Yisrael in the end. They never experienced it, but even though they changed their mind, you see after the spies they changed their mind, but Moshe knows that door is closed. That chapter's over for now. What about the Bnei Ephraim, the ones who went out early and they died in the desert? The Gemara says, do you know that story of Yechezkel that we read, I think, in the Haftarah of Yom Kippur, where in the Valley of Dry Bones, when the story of Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael is taking place, and they're being saved by miracle, and Daniel, the whole that. So Yechezkel's out there doing the miracle. Because their bones were there. And he brings them all back to life. And they actually end up making aliyah, getting to Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara says, nah. And one person says, we see these tefillah. These are the tefillah of, I think, my grandfather, who was one of those people who went to Eretz Yisrael. They actually made aliyah. They actually got to live out their lives. At the end, they came back. They died for a while, came back and made Israel. Everybody else that stayed behind and left with Moshe didn't, except for the 2. Not even Moshe, not even Aaron, not even Miriam. They didn't make it Eretz Yisrael. But these people later on did. There's a message in there somewhere. There's something about the fact that, God says, you're right. You're right. It was not the time, but I like the way you wanted to leave. I like the way that you were redemption conscious. That was. I can't take you there now because that's not the master plan right now. That's not in the cards at this moment in time because history has to go through whatever it has to go through, and that's not going to work right now. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to put that on the side for the time being, and when it is appropriate, I'm going to bring you back to life and let you do a lot later than you originally planned, but you'll get there. You'll know it. You'll get to enjoy it on this side of history. So there's something, about this idea of being redemption conscious. Very important to redemption conscious. So whatever you get out of it, right? The main thing I'm trying to stress and get over to people is the fact that there's this process going on behind the scenes that we're part of. We might see it, we might not see it. I just saw a very interesting idea someone sent to me about brain scientist, if I get this right, and he was trying to describe how reality works. So, for example, he said he looked like a laptop. What do you mean by a laptop? Well, he says a laptop, let's say, for example, you have a file folder on the screen. And there's no real file folder on the screen, right? The file folder is just an image projected on the screen using pixels and data and information, and there's wire, there's this and there's that. There's a whole, so many different things. But you want to know not really what you're interested in, and if you did, you probably use it and be creative. So what they've done basically is they've lied to you. The laptop is lying to you, but for your benefit. It's telling you, brain, if I press on this thing and open it up, I'm actually like opening a file folder. But all that's going on is information being moved around based upon your commands and based upon the circuitry that doesn't really accurately describe reality, except in a level that you can work with. He goes on to explain this in more detail. Very, very, very fascinating, about the fabric of reality. And it's the same analogy as well. You're looking at a world. You're reading news. You're seeing what's going on, online or in television or just in real. People do this. People saying that. This is happening. That's happening. Floods, disaster, financial markets. It's all but it's like the file folder. It's all subterfuge. Now, a lot of people, they fall for this. I mean, they really believe there's a file folder in the screen, as if they can bend over, pick it up with their fingers, and the little fingers, like this, right? And it's not b'chalal the asset. You go close enough, you touch the screen. You can't get into the file folder that way because it's not there. It just gives you the impression, your brain, that it's there. And the same thing is true about history. Everything taking place around us appears to be what it is, and it's much realer than the file folder on a screen, that's for sure. You can touch people and you can open car doors and things like that. But whatever's happening, it's all just a cover for what's really going on behind the scenes, below the surface. So I'm going to read something right now, and it's part of what we were talking about last week. We ended up talking about the upside down hourglass, about how instead of grains coming to below tell us when the hour is over, we're talking about sparks of light that are in the bottom in our world that have to be elevated up to the proper locations and rectified and fixed in order for history to come to an end. So this is along the same lines as this idea, and I'm going to read it and translate, explain it, but it will make pretty much no sense to anybody unless you have this kind of background, and then I'll try to put it in terms that people can relate to, just as part of the preparation process. This is the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the biggest Kabbalist in the last 500 years, in a sefer called Shar HaGilgulim, which is literally gates of reincarnations, which is not just about reincarnation, but about personal rectification and a lot of history too. And he says the following thing, okay? He says, you have to also know, we've already spoken about in the past, both, not only did Adam do a sin that changed the whole world, but also his sons too. Both Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel, they did sins too. And it affected the world because they were big people who had big impacts in history back at that time. Today, we're much smaller, much more limited impact on history in the world, but they had major impact. They were the sons of Adam and Rishon. And they made mistakes too. Cain, he murdered somebody, right? And Hevel, the discussion as to exactly what he did wrong, but nonetheless, there was a sin. So he says, because of their sins, they cause the souls to become combined and mixed with the klipos. That's a word that most people don't really know until you start to learn a little bit of Kabbalah, although there are a few references here and there in the Siddur and different places to the idea of klipos. But for all intents and purposes, just for the time being, without going into much discussion, the word klip itself means peel. A peel of an orange is a klipa, or an egg is a klipa. Normally it peels a good thing. It protects the egg, protects the orange, protects the apple, whatever the case may be. But in this case, the klipa has a negative connotation. It encases the heart, spiritually speaking, and interferes with the person's ability to connect to God. That's what we call that evil, or the forces of spiritual impurity, whatever you want to call it. But it's there to challenge it, like the Satan. So Satan, the angel. The word Satan means obstruct. For us to use free will, right? Remember, you have to be confronted. You have to make moral choices. It has to be relevant to do evil. Any evil that's not relevant to a person, they would never consider doing a thing like that. There's no free will choice for them. You have to have something like moral, the struggle to be able to use your free will. So that's what the Satan does. That's what the klipas do. They create a reality of evil, not so we should be dragged down by it, but so we should confront it and overwhelm it, overcome it, and fix the world and get rewarded for it. But as a result of these sins, the souls of people that are eventually going to come out in history go into this reality of spiritual impurity. It's like a spiritual swamp, and get buried down there and are affected by it. V'zenikra eruv tov v'ra. And this is what we mean, talking about the mixture of good and evil, right? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's a mixture of good and evil. So the whole world is a mixture of good and evil. Even tzaddikim, even righteous people, as Shlomo Melech said, there's some aspect, not like the rest of us necessarily, but there's something in them that, relatively speaking to them, can be considered evil. And we're all mixture. And life is the process. It's the process of trying to remove the evil from within us, the Yetzer Hara, and hopefully the opposite of pleasure is no pleasure. No pleasure. And that's a discussion for itself. Someone just asked that question, just popped up on the screen over here. But just the point over here right now. So it's basically this combination that we're all made up of, and the world in general. And you see that the evil can overcome the good, and we're supposed to fight it back. So he says that's what happened. History has been about the separation of the good from the evil. That's what we're supposed to do. Adam's sin. Before the sin of Adam Arishon, the first man, good was separate and evil was separate. They were distinguishable. They did not combine. And caused that combination to occur and spread to all of creation, including mankind. Now the rest of history is about undoing that. We're rectifying, taking us thousands of years to fix up the first man's sin of this combination of things, and then Cain and Hevel only made the situation worse. And that's what life is about. You wake up in the morning and you're choosing good the whole day, hopefully. That's the idea. You might have a few weak moments, but you're trying to do good the whole day. The Torah tells us what good is and encourages us to do more of it. And every time you choose good over evil, you separate out the holiness from the impurity, and you fix the world that much more and get rewarded for it. That's the portion you get in the world to come is made up of all the good that you separate out from the evil. So he says, right? It's just like smelting, silver. You take silver, it's in a rock. You can't make a bracelet or a necklace out of the silver in the rock. So you heat up the rock to a very high temperature. The rock will not melt because it takes a higher temperature to melt the rock, but the silver does melt, separates out from the rock, and then you refine, take out more, right? But it's a smelting process to get the gold or silver or iron ore away from the rock. Same thing. They were trying to get the good out from the evil, from the bad. Okay? Babiru hazem nishach asher ayushami l'spared kol neshamas shnaflu b'ramach ivam shel adam abliyah. And this process will continue all through history until finally the last soul is out. And he goes on to explain what that means in terms of Kabbalistic terminology, which I'll skip for the time being. So he says, Kivan, she's baru kol neshamas legamri. Once all the souls have been pulled out of this spiritual swamp, spiritual, right? Az ein adam de klipa shuhu hasigim esrichel hasigim Technical terminology, but the basic idea is like this: that that evil and good. If a person wants to rob a bank and he's using a card to rob the bank, he has to use this either battery or he has to use gasoline. If he needs gasoline, he goes. There's no like gas station for evil people and one for good people, right? The white gas station is for the good people who are doing mitzvahs, and the black gas station is the bad. No, that's all one thing. They go to the exact same gas station and fill up the same gasoline, same tanks, everything. Just that one uses it for good, one uses it for bad. As long as the evil people have access to fuel, have energy, food, whatever keeps them going, the evil can function and do its thing. If you want to stop evil, and this is, by the way, what happened in World War II, in order to stop the Nazis from taking over the rest of Europe and to actually push them back, they had to cut off their supply lines, primarily their oil, because that's what made the tanks drive. That's what made their trucks drive. If they can't drive tanks, they can't drive trucks, they cannot push their war effort, and they have to retreat instead. And that's what the Allies did. They would bomb, for example, they bombed dams. They were dam busters because the water was necessary to produce the steel. The water can't be used to produce electricity, the steel. They can't produce the guns and the machinery and things like that necessary to fight a war. So you're always cutting off the enemy's supply lines. If you cannot kill the enemy himself, which is not always possible, you get at him by cutting off his supply lines. It's no different than the spiritual world. It isn't from the physical world. And the spiritual world means that you have to cut off the supply of holiness, is what we're all eating. When you eat food, it's not the food that keeps you alive. It's the spark of holiness inside the food itself. This is why we pushed the goat off the cliff in Yom Kippur, the Zohar says, because we gave some of the kedusha, the holiness, to the other side, because as long as free will is necessary, you have to have the satan. So therefore, he has to eat too in a controlled amount. And these concepts run all through Kabbalah and Torah and Halakha and things like that. But the point is that there comes a time when hopefully over history we'll be able to completely cut off the supply. And once they cut the supply lines, there's not much else you have to do. People die. If people don't have food, they just die. They can't drink, they die. So if you can cut off the supply line, the kedusha, the holiness, to the side, the other side, the side of the klippas, the side of impurity, the side of evil, it will simply die. But even more than that, he says, it will disappear because it's spiritual. Physical things, when they die, decompose. It takes time. You have to bury people and bury things. But the spiritual world, when something no longer has any access to a life force, boom, just like that disappears like smoke. And that's why it says in your machzor, right there, every year we talk about this in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it says that evil will go up like smoke. What does smoke do? Big billowy smoke is blocking the view. It can choke a person to death, God forbid. But a wind comes along and it dissipates. It doesn't like fall to the ground, you have to bury it. It just disappears like it never was there, because it goes into the air, dissolves. So the same thing will happen to evil as well. It goes into say, okay, Huvdala minasigim and ikram others, because kedusha, holiness, which is God, is life, and as long as the evil side can still access holiness, which, by the way, we feed it extra when we do a sin. When a person sins, they give their holiness to the other side and make it stronger. I won't go into it right now because it's a longer discussion. But where does evil get the power, the energy to be able to kill 6 million Jews? It sounds like a technical process. You just build camps and gas chambers. That's what you're seeing physically. Spiritually, it's a whole that can't exist physically unless it can exist spiritually first. And if it's existing spiritually, it has to come somewhere from the side of holiness. Where did that energy come from to be able to do that? That's hugely important. But the main idea right now is you cut off the life force and it disappears completely. So the side of evil no longer has any life for it whatsoever. And like smoke, it will disappear. And this is what it says. The pasuk says, right? That death will be swallowed up forever. Ki lo yivula ad shizbaru kol neshamas kulam. But it's not going to happen until all the souls have been taken out. And we say souls, by the way, we don't just mean people's souls. Souls means like the life force of anything in existence, in creation at all. But whatever spark of life is in there, they're feeding off it. They're living off of it right now. When they're all out, they have nothing to live off. There's no other place to get any energy or life. Therefore, the Roshi Tevis of the words Bala Mavis Lenetzach, the head letters, we call Roshi Tevis, literally head letters, which means like the acronym. The first each of the Bala is the first letter is a base. Hamavis is a hey, and the last word Lenetzach is a lamed, right? They spell hevel, who able, right? They spell hevel, right? Because we said that's part of the reason why they get mixed together. There was ki ad yushlam geula shel hevel, and this indicates as a hint to us that until all the reincarnations of hevel, because he's been reincarnating over and over again, right, are complete. And who's the completion of his reincarnation? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe stands for Moshe Shem Hevel. Moshe Sheis Hevel, sorry. Right? First there's Hevel, and he got killed by his brother. He reincarnated as Sheis, which is the third son that Adam and Chava had, and then he died eventually, and then he came back as Moshe Rabbeinu. As that was the completion of Hevel's perfection and reincarnation, right? That's all we found. That's finished in the all of history. Then finally, it's all done. When that process is over, the Mashiach finally comes. So it's like here we are, all we talk Mashiach Shavot. Now Yavo Mashiach, and he should come and save the world, fix the world. Mashiach is like Mashiach. What does it mean? What does it mean? How? Well, it's like he should come 100%. But why? How? Is there anything we can do to facilitate this? Or just have to wait and suffer? Well, he says right here, this is the process. The process is you get all these souls out, and Mashiach has to come. There's no waiting around any longer. He wants to come, but why can't he come? Because there's still sparks, there's still lights, and there's still souls in the klipa, still in that negative reality, whatever you want to call it. And when you finish that off, just like that, he comes. He has to. It's not like, well, I wasn't ready for this. Look, they finished the work. It's like the son handed in the final book report. The father he couldn't say, no, I'm going to wait another week or two. No, this was the deal. When you finish that, you get this. The whole process of waiting for Mashiach was just to finish off the tikkun of Adam Harishon and to just separate the good from the evil. And then he goes on to say, talks about how Moshe Rabbeinu comes back in the final generation together with the Erev Rav. But this is the history. Whatever else you're watching, whatever else you're witnessing, whatever else you're a part of. I mean, everyone else is walking around and living in their own world and thinking this is all there is. They're not even conscious of what's going on behind the scenes. The same way, for example, I don't think about what's going on behind my screen, but I always wonder, you look at this, it's so thin. How do you get all this inside there? I mean, I know it's all this electronics, but still, and it gets smaller and thinner and smaller and thinner. And if I could see it the way it really looks, you pull off the top and look inside. It's like it's awesome and amazing, but more than that, you have more control if you understand how it works. Most of us don't. We just go with the simple stuff because we're not interested in getting it more complicated than that. So, if it's all about the separation of the good from the evil, I'm looking at the world today and I just see evil overwhelming good. It just seems like just the opposite. It seems like we're going the other direction. It seems like, we don't have a chance. It's like we're done. It's like, we lost, 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago when the world was more conservative, that maybe back then there was a chance, there was a hope. And maybe it was better. It was more appropriate. And that's why these wars come along, by the way. God reboots the system. We get out of control. too much. But today, and not just evil seems so rampant, at least from a Torah perspective. A lot of people doing evil think they're doing great stuff. They think they're making the world a better place, even though it's exactly the opposite of what God wants for creation. So there you have the Gra. There you have the other sefer I mentioned before of Achris Kereshis, the Vilna Gaon, and the Ramchal, and they say very specifically, you have to understand that if you go back, decades ago, maybe it was the state of Israel, maybe it was, the end of the Holocaust, maybe it was something else that we're not even so aware of, but it was a sign of redemption. It was a sneak preview, like Yosef gave to his brothers at the end of last week's parsha, like Moshe gives to the Jewish people when he shows up the first time. They think it failed. It didn't fail. Moshe didn't fail the first time. That was the first stage of the process. They didn't know that it meant him going back to Midian for 6 months and then suffering some more, having to look for straw that they couldn't find. And they just thought, we thought we're going out, and boom, the whole thing blew up in our face, and now we're finished. No. That was stage one. That's why God says at the end of this week's parsha, Moshe says, why just send me? Because he's just learning the ropes too. And he says to God, why just send me? The situation got way worse since they went down to Mitzrayim. This is what you call redemption? And as I've made mention in the past, you might expect God to say, I know it sounds hard, but don't worry, it's all part of the process. I understand where you're coming from. It'll be okay. He doesn't say that. He says to Moshe, what? You're complaining? I only spoke and promised redemption to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and you're witnessing it before your eyes, and you're questioning me? Okay, you're going to see the conquering of Paro, but you're not going to go to the land of Israel and see the conquering of the 31 kings that live there because of what you're doing over here. It never stopped. So the Vilna Gaon, and he explains very, very, such an insight, such an important yesod. If you don't know these things, you get completely, thrown off. And he says that the moment this little bit of good comes out, like Moshe going down to Mitzrayim, evil, spiritually, not the people themselves down here, but evil senses the end is near, and it fights with a vengeance. It comes back with everything it has to undo it, and it looks as if it's going to win it and overwhelm, because the good was so small compared to all the evil that's come out after. But the joke's on the evil, unfortunately, on us too, a large degree, because a lot of people suffer because of this. But that's all part of hashgacha pratis and personal, judgment. And there's a lot of factors that come and make it all work out and smooth it all over, and we'll all see this eventually, hopefully, God willing, in the Messianic era. But in the meantime, you just have to understand that all this evil is going on in the world today. That's in response to the good that told us the redemption is at hand, it is coming, and therefore it's fighting back, and it thinks it's undoing it, and it thinks that it's blocking it. It's actually accelerating it. It's actually facilitating, because the more evil that comes out of the world, the faster it gets used up. The faster it gets used up, the faster they run out of their source of their supply of energy, and eventually, boom. Now, why that way? Well, that's the option. As the Gemara says, the Mashiach can come one of two ways, either achishena or bi'ito, bita, at the last possible moment or early. What does it depend upon? Well, the more that we do to use up those sparks, to pull them out by doing mitzvahs, by facilitating redemption, by giving tzedakah, by doing kindnesses, by learning Torah, and not just learning, just reading, but putting yourself into it, and more. The more kedusha that you bring into this world, the more you deny kedusha to the wrong side, the other side. You shorten their lifespan, and the faster you bring the redemption. But if we don't, it has to still be taken away from them. So either, and this is the rule, redemption either comes because of us or through us. Through us is bita, the war of Gog and Magog, whatever has to happen to finish it off. Because of us is because of all the energy we're expending to bring those sparks out. So yeah, it's a complicated process. Yes, it's quite Kabbalistic, and we're only scratching the surface, and there's books to read and things to understand. But lemaisa, as we say, practically speaking, you just have to understand, at least know that this process you cannot see with your physical eye, just your mind's eye, that's going on in the background that's responsible for all of it, and every aspect of it, and every individual. And it's affecting your life every single moment. But you can be more actively involved in that process by taking the kedusha and using it in the right way, by using the sparks in a meaningful way. Don't just do Torah mitzvahs because that's what you're obligated to do. That's a good reason to do it, but that's not the reason to do it. Do it because you understand you're partnering with God in this process, and you want to make it as smooth as possible. You want to mitigate the impact of the end of history. The faster we do that, the faster those sparks become weakened, or they become strong, but the klipas become weakened, and history comes to an end, and we land, in the redemption, runway, so to speak, in a much safer, less precarious way. Should it happen in our time, God willing? I think it will. Shabbat shalom.
Rabbi Winston, thank you so much for a beautiful shiur, a beautiful class. I want you to know I'm talking to you right now from Jerusalem, and I'll turn around so you can see the Jerusalem Bridge. If you can see it, I don't know. This way, I guess. Okay. The bridge is in the background. Thank you, Rabbi, for always inspiring us to be better people, to do what we need to do to bring the geula, bring the redemption. Thank you so much. Everybody have a great Shabbat, great Shabbos. Can you see it, Rabbi? Can you see the bridge? No. Thank you. Bye.